spend a minute on the second one, which is engagement, which I also put in why. This is one that I think has had very, very little written on, but I think is extraordinarily important. So I'm going to spend a little bit longer on this one probably than the others, because I think this is where there's probably the biggest single hole in literature. So now you have a group of motivated people who care about the mission, right? And you want them to take initiative, right? Well, unless they deeply understand the strategy of the company and how exactly what they do fits into that, how are they going to take initiative? Right? I mean, kind of generally, they may have a sense, but unless you really reinforce that down to specifically what people can do every single day and how the 5% changes in what they do can impact the overall health of the company, it doesn't matter if you give people the latitude if they don't have the knowledge to make those decisions appropriately. And I'm amazed at how few executives see their role is to communicate to their people and communicate a lot, context, detail about strategy of the company. Let me tell you one story on this that I didn't really realize at the time, but fully drove it home for me. So I had a trial by fire at Delta. So I joined Delta literally at noon on 9/11, which was a little bit crazy, in finance. So, you know, airline in trouble, so I came in as treasurer and strategy, and so, you know, I had kind of 30, 40 people working for me in kind of the finance area. I then a couple years later was promoted to running the network, which is not the computer network, but where and how people fly. So, you know, you can blame me for having to connect over Atlanta and all that kind of stuff. You can blame me for a lot of stuff on that, but we'll get into that. Anyway, so I had a couple hundred people working for me. You know, it's kind of a very staffish type job. We then started rolling up close to a sense that we might have to file for bankruptcy. Oil spikes to over $100 a barrel. We're bleeding cash. And the board comes in and says, okay, Jim, figure it out. You're chief operating officer. You get it all. Put together a plan. So all of a sudden, I went from having a couple hundred people reporting to me to 80,000 people reporting to me. And I was 35 at the time. I'm still amazed that they actually did this. If I'd known what I know now, I'm not sure I would have taken the job. And we're hurtling towards bankruptcy. So in that context, I didn't have a lot of time to spend out, you know, new job greeting people. I was like locked in a room with consultants and bankers putting together a bankruptcy plan. And it's maybe a little bit too much detail, but I think it helps illustrate the point. So factoid, which seems ironic, is for corporate bankruptcies, bankruptcy's not for the poor. You have to have a lot of money to file for bankruptcy. Because, you know, the way bankruptcy, you know, you're never getting any more money, so you got to build this big old pile of cash that you have to live off of during the couple of years when you're going through the process of restructuring. And so your immediate, so we had about 8 weeks after I took the job before we needed to file. And so the first 4 weeks we're putting together the plan, and the next 4 weeks we're raising what's called the debtor in possession loan, the DIP loan, which is this big pile of cash that you raise to live on through a bankruptcy. And it's basically secured by, you know, everything, kitchen sink, firstborn, all that stuff. Well, to raise a couple $1 billion when you're losing money and hurling towards bankruptcy is not an easy thing to do. And so the CFO and I would go in and do this pitch over and over and over. Literally for a couple weeks, we had this conference room in New York at our lawyers' offices where these bankers would come in and you would give the pitch on the job. And so I had about a 45-minute pitch, 45 minutes to an hour pitch, where I would go through the details of the restructuring. You know, move wide bodies from domestic to international, and, you know, down gauge this and outsource heavy maintenance, and this whole long, close to an hour spiel by the time I would get through it. And we got to the point where the CFO and I would sometimes laugh that, wow, we ought to go in, and I should say I'm the CFO, and he should say he's the COO, and let's give each other's pitches, because we're getting bored giving the same thing over and over and over again. Well, we ultimately did raise the largest debtor in possession loan in history at the time. It was several $1 billion. Ultimately, Delphi beat us out when they filed a few months later. But anyway, it's a lot of money, a couple $1 billion. And the day we filed for bankruptcy was just, it was an awful day. You know, you're kind of admitting failure, and there's press all over the place. You're on the national news, and so it's, you have these PR consultants who are walking you around all day, and they've choreographed it all. Well, at some point during the day, our head of maintenance said, hey, it'd really be nice if, you know, you could maybe at the end of the day come over to meet some of the mechanics on the line. And so I said, sure, of course, yeah, no problem, let's get that worked out. Well, I didn't bother to tell anybody that. It was just kind of a quick conversation. So I go through the whole day. It's 7 o'clock. We're starting to wind down, and I get this text like, "Hey, we're going to get people together around 9:30, after shift change if you want to kind of still come over to the hangar." So I thought, well, okay, and so I've been going nonstop all day. I ultimately go over. That's one thing I do miss. I had an FAA badge, so I could drive across the tarmac to either get on a plane. As the senior executive, I have no idea what you go through going through an airport. It's sad but true. Anyway, so I drive across the tarmac to the hangar, get out, walk in a room, and it had about this many people, a couple hundred people, and they're all sitting there without food because we're in bankruptcy, and they're all looking at me. And I step up on stage and I think, I have no idea what I'm going to tell these people. Like, not a clue. I hadn't thought about it. It hadn't been choreographed. Wasn't planned. And they're all looking at me waiting for me to tell them something. Now, the problem with this as well is this is the night shift, right? Night shift line maintenance. Now, if you can think about jobs that you want, working in Atlanta in the summer sucks, right? I mean, outside, right? So nobody wants to work on the line, and nobody wants to work the night shift, which sadly your most seasoned senior mechanics work day shift seat shop because it's air conditioned. So your most junior mechanics are working line maintenance at night. Anyway, part of the plan was we were saying we're going to outsource heavy maintenance, right? So we're going to do a massive layoff in maintenance. And these are your most junior mechanics, so they're all getting laid off. Like, everybody in that room was going to get laid off. And you walk in there without security, and I never had security. And you look at all these people and you think, what on earth am I going to tell this group of 200 people that just basically were told today when we made this announcement that at some point in the next few months they're all going to get laid off? And so I had no idea. So other than apologizing up front, I just turned on and said, let me tell you the plan. And I spent the next hour just by rote, because I'd given it every day for the prior 2 weeks, the full gory detail of the turnaround plan. And I even added in, it was over an hour, because I added in a bunch of the stuff that the CFO was saying as well. And everybody sat there politely listening for like an hour and a half. And I get done, and they start asking really intelligent questions. Like, well, can a 757 really do that route? And does it have the mission capability? Nothing about when am I going to get laid off or pay or anything else. So anyway, I finish all of that. I go home. I wake up the next morning, and I have a text from the head of maintenance saying, I don't know what you did, but it's like all over the company. You got to get over to the hangars because everybody wants to hear this story. So I ended up canceling a bunch of things I had the next day, went over and started going hangar by hangar and given the same pitch that I gave to the bankers. And I didn't think anything that much about it. What I didn't realize is the idea that a senior executive would come spend that much time talking about the plan in detail to the frontline mechanics seemed unprecedented to all of them. And if you wonder whether it was valuable or not, one of the things we modified it, kind of tweaked it over the first few days to try to make sure we were kind of crisp about roles of different people. We talked a lot about safe, clean, on time. So we started to say, look, we have to run the safest airline out there. We're going to have the cleanest planes out there because, a dirty lab in a bankrupt carrier, people worry about safety, right? And we're going to run this place on time. And so we talked about the importance of that. We telling people, look, your role in this is on time, right? You can complain about all the reasons you can't be on time, but anyway, so we worked that into the speech. A month after we filed for bankruptcy and we had rolled through and gave this speech, Delta went from the last of the major carriers to first in on-time performance, and we held that for, I think, every month but one, when we had some really bad storms one month, for the entire time we were in bankruptcy for the next 2 years. We went from worst to first in on-time performance. I've been interviewed by consultants and press and others saying, how did you do it, re-engineering this, scheduled, blah, blah. And the simple answer is, we did nothing. We just told people it was important and that's what they could do as part of the turnaround. Just telling people in detail, here's the strategy of the company, what that unlocked in terms of people's willingness to get involved, because now they had the context, they knew it, and you told them what they could do to help make it important. The difference in performance is night and day. And I think we all forget that most people don't sit in management meetings. They don't know what the overall plan is. Providing people that context and then attaching for what they can do can be incredibly powerful.